point was this quote by Dogen, which you probably know. He says, before one studies Zen, mountains are mountains, waters are waters. After a first glimpse into the truth of Zen, mountains are no longer mountains, waters no longer waters. After enlightenment, mountains are once again mountains and waters are once again waters. And, you know, I've known this quote for ages, you know, for a lot of years, and I always liked it. But then I just thought, well, what does that mean? You know, I just started thinking, what does that mean? That, you know, in the end, everything is back to where we started, you know. Mountains are once again mountains, yeah. And delving into it a little bit, I did find this this thing in Zen which I hadn't come across before, of the idea of coming full circle. Yeah, so this idea that we circling back, you know, circling back to the starting point. The Mokshadaka's there, that's nice. Yeah, so yeah, mountains are once again mountains, you know. So what is this quote pointing to? So I thought we'd start. So in a way, it's like saying, what is awakening then? So what does it mean to be enlightened? What is awakening if we come full circle and mountains are once again mountains? So I thought we'd start with, you know, what is awakening to us? You know, that's a good question to check in with ourselves about from time to time. So what is, you know, what is awakening to you? You know, what is awakening to me? And I think it's a really interesting question, because probably every single person would answer that question differently. And we'll answer that question, well, in a sense, the answer to the question might not tell us that much about awakening, but it will tell us something about, you know, what we really value, in a sense, or what I was thinking, actually, in a sense, it's a bit more like, you know, what do I want awakening to be? That's what I was thinking. It's like, what do I want awakening to be? And it reminded me of, some people know a friend of mine, Vajradarshini. We used to live together, and we used to have this argument quite a few times, discussion rather than argument, but around, I would say, like, yeah, the Buddha would definitely, you know, the Buddha, after he was enlightened, he would have still felt grief, you know. And she would say, no, no, you know, once he was enlightened, he wouldn't have experienced grief anymore. And we'd have this argument, and it was obviously just like, I wanted an enlightenment that included grief, you know, and she wanted an enlightenment that was free from grief. So you're sort of finding out what you want enlightenment to be. But anyway, I thought it was a really good starting point for this session. So we're just going to take 5 minutes just to think quietly, like, what is enlightenment or awakening, whatever word. I mean, it's interesting what word you like to use as well. But what is it to you? What image or word or phrase comes to mind most strongly? And then I'm going to ask people to just share that if you're happy to. We'll just go around and share that. So it could just be a word or an image or a sentence. So we just have a few minutes to think about that. Okay, so maybe you could even think of the question really as being like, what is enlightenment? What is awakening to me today? You know, because it's an answer that might change day by day or year by year. But if you'd like to just share what came into your mind or your heart, you could just unmute yourself. I think we can just do it in a fairly random way. And yeah, it would be really nice to hear some of your responses to that question.
I have an idea. I think what hit me was clarity. And I think especially right now, everything is clouded over with the smoke and we can't even see the sky. But there's this sort of brightness coming through all that smoke. So the idea of all of that being cleared away and just being something as simple as a blue sky, like actually seeing it for what it is.
Nice clarity.
And I sort of wanted to say love, but I found myself thinking effortlessness.
I'll go with unchecked kindness, unbounded kindness.
Unbounded kindness. That's nice.
I was thinking a flowing, gentle breeze, fresh air, in movement, fresh ideas. Fresh air would be nice.
What was that last bit?
Fresh air would be nice.
Fresh air would be nice. Yeah, everybody's clarity and fresh air.
Well, the first thing that came up to me for me was never getting stuck. But I thought, well, yes, and what's the positive side of that? And I thought, oh, it's boundless flow. Oh, yeah.
Boundless flow.
What came up for me was boundlessness, because I feel very constricted right now and I just need a lot more space.
Boundlessness.
I was thinking a completely open, unguarded, but wisely responding heart.
I was thinking a concept, an ideal that doesn't necessarily exist other than that.
Sorry, say that again.
A concept, enlightenment is a concept, an ideal that doesn't necessarily exist other than
as a concept. Yeah.
I was thinking about seeing clearly how the inner and outer worlds touch. Having that perspective.
For me, it's peace.
Was that Prasada Chitta? Did you say that?
Yeah.
No? Frank. Oh, sorry. I can't always find who's speaking on that. Frank, you said peace, did you say?
Yes.
Peace. And Prasada Chitta, you've been trying to say something.
Oh, I've been thinking about continuity of purpose, and in terms of loving kindness, so that it, isn't that it can be a part of everything. Eating my banana, getting out of bed, etc.
Nice. Yeah.
The word that came to my mind was expansion.
Expansion.
It just kept coming back.
To be completely present in the conversation, honestly and without fear.
I thought of unbounded imagination.
Unbounded imagination.
experiencing experiencing life on a different level than this more bounded level that I'm. So boundlessness is part of that. Also, the ability to connect, the connection of our interconnectedness, to be able to really experience that interconnectedness.
I was thinking of allowing and listening, like, and watching the flow without interruption, like listening and watching a river.
I noticed that awakening was a much more accessible word for me than enlightenment. And
yeah.
And that I feel like I need to be more free of my habituated self to answer the question, but my guesses are that it's open-hearted, permeable, kind, and turning towards what is.
Mine was to be married to amazement without necessarily needing to marvel. So being totally committed to staying in relationship to amazement, yeah, without needing to marvel.
That's great.
I thought about just this wide open space that sort of feels like it's kind of outside and inside, but it's not a cold space, it's a warm space that's just sort of full of kind of open-heartedness and connection and kindness.
Anyone else? So that's, yeah, I can sign up for all those. When I think of awakening, I think it's usually some sort of freedom. It's all to do with freedom for me. I know it has been for quite a long time, I think. All to do with freedom from, I don't know, different things at different times, but got that flavour of freedom. So there's this story of Tsongkhapa, who's one of the old Tibetan teachers from like hundreds of years ago. A very well-known teacher, and there's this story that goes that he is one day he's sitting reading a text by Nagarjuna, and he's reading this text and he falls asleep. Let me just hide myself view because he's reading the text, he falls asleep, and he dreams that Nagarjuna comes and hits him on the head with the text. And in the dream, when Nagarjuna hits him on the head with the text, it kind of wakes him up. So he wakes up from this dream, he's just been hit over the head with the text. And he looks down at the verse that he's just been reading, he rereads the verse. And the story goes that in that moment, he has a full and sudden non-conceptual understanding of emptiness. Yeah. And he says it's like having his world turned upside down. And so this understanding of emptiness is like having his world turned upside down. And this vision of emptiness is exactly the opposite of what he'd imagined it to be. So somehow I love that story, and it also just makes me laugh, that, there's this person obviously like very seriously on the path to awakening, and he obviously has done all his study. He's studying the Gardner and everything. And yet when in that moment of awakening, it's the complete opposite of what he thought it was. So I think there's all different ways that we could think about that. But it made me think, like, in a way, it's a bit like some sort of cosmic joke, it feels like. Yeah, that whatever you think whatever we think we're doing, whatever kind of path we think we're on, actually, the only thing the only thing we can say for sure about awakening is it won't be what we think it is now. Yeah. And also, presumably, that doesn't matter, So somehow, what it made me think was like somehow, what's important is that we have an idea of awakening that is enough to keep us on the path. Presumably that's all that matters in a sense, isn't it? Like if we have an idea of awakening that can keep us on the path, then maybe it doesn't matter that it turns out to be something completely different, as long as it's attractive enough to kind of keep us looking, and I was also, it made me think, and again this verse, mountains are once again mountains, it made me think of the story of when the Buddha's enlightenment, so he's under the tree, and he decides he's just going to sit there until he figures this out, and he sits there, and in the end he does wake up, he becomes enlightened, or whatever words we want to use for that. And his his response to that is to think, I am never going to be able to explain this to another person, so it's quite a sort of classic story, isn't it, from the life of the Buddha, that after his awakening, he goes through quite this long period where he's just thinking, there is no way I can explain this to another person, And I was thinking that, there's different ways that we can understand that story. So I think in the past, I've understood it as like, oh my God, this awakening is so amazing and so so out of this world, so unlike anything I've experienced or the Buddha had experienced, that there's no way he can explain it to another person. But then another way that we could think about that, or I'm just suggesting that this is another possibility, is that that awakening is so close to ordinary everyday experience, but completely different, that the Buddha doesn't know how to explain it. Do you know what I mean? So you get this quite a lot in Zen, and in that sense of coming full circle. You get this sense like, that maybe it's so, maybe it's just right under our noses, but there's some kind of veil that stops us from seeing it because it's so close, in a sense. And it brought to mind the verses, which I'm sure you familiar with, the verses from, what is it called? Self-liberation through seeing with naked awareness. So the Padmasambhava text that says, I'm going to put these quotes, actually. I've got an online space where these quotes are, so I'll give you that later. So don't worry about wanting to remember the quotes or think more about them. But so this Padmasambhava text, he says, Amar Ho, which means amazing, amazing. It's the single nature of mind which encompasses all of samsara and nirvana. So like, you know, all of samsara and nirvana, they're not separate, they're not two separate things. It's a single nature of mind. Amazing. So even though its inherent nature has existed from the very beginning, you have not recognized it. You know, so it's existed, it's been there, the nature of mind, this awakening has existed from the very beginning, but you have not recognized it. Amazing. Even though its clarity and presence has been uninterrupted, you have not yet encountered its face. So it's not even been, you know, it's been there the whole time. It's been completely uninterrupted. If you think about that, like even when you've been distracted, even when you've been asleep, you know, it's been uninterrupted, but you haven't encountered it. You haven't seen it. Amazing. And even though its arising has nowhere been obstructed, still you have not comprehended it. So, you know, it hasn't even been obstructed and we still haven't seen it. You know, so that really is pointing to this like sense of, you know, it is right in front of it's right in front of us, you know, it's under our nose, it's so close, you know, it's like, you know, the fish saying, take me to the ocean or whatever, you know, the fish is in the ocean, you know, it's that close. So in a minute, we're going to have a chance to discuss some of these things. So this is my thread for the month, yeah, this mountains and mountains, the sense of coming full circle, sense of like, well, what is awakening? Is it close? Is it far? You know, how do I understand that? And then the next thing that I came across is was an article by somebody called Andrew Olensky, who you might know. He's really, really good. He often writes in Tricycle. You often see his articles in Tricycle, but he's just, he's very creative. I mean, he's a kind of Buddhist scholar, so he writes scholarly articles about Buddhism, but it's just very beautiful the way he writes, and his mind, he has such good ideas. And there's a book that I'd really recommend, which is called Untangling the Self, or Untangling Self, which is a new collection of these essays, which is really good. And one of these essays is called A Modest Awakening. Yeah, A Modest Awakening. And you know, some of you know that I'm into this theme wabi sabi, which I won't go into now, but there's something about this, you know, this title really caught my attention, A Modest Awakening, you know, because wabi sabi is all about the ordinary and the incidental and the beauty of that. So in a way, it's sort of pointing to more modest things rather than the big, shouty, exciting things, you know. So I was quite taken with this, just this title, A Modest Awakening. And it's a great essay. Actually, you can probably find it online. But one little quote from it that he says is, what if the nirvana experienced by the Buddha in Bodh Gaya turns out to be something considerably less magnificent than the later mythic tradition? Yet, at the same time, by virtue of its being actually attainable by ordinary folk, something of unparalleled value. So I'm just going to read that again. So what if the nirvana experienced by the Buddha in Bodh Gaya turns out to be something considerably less magnificent than that of the later mythic tradition? Yet at the same time, by virtue of its being actually attainable by ordinary folk, something of unparalleled value. So, yeah, I thought we could explore this together. So we started off just sharing like our own sense of, you know, what awakening is to us. And, you know, when you come across Buddhism, there's all different types of Buddhism, isn't it? All different schools and different traditions, you know, and in some of them, or most of them, you know, enlightenment or awakening, it just becomes so big, doesn't it? You know, that it's like, you know, maybe in 20 lifetimes I might manage to, you know, it sort of can become, yeah, something unattainable, actually. So it can become unattainable because, you know, it's sort of, we value it so much, it's valued so much by the tradition, that then it's built into this thing that actually is so valuable that it's unattainable, you know. And what about if actually it's far more attainable than we think it is, and that is its value, that it is a realistic human possibility, potential for just ordinary people. We don't even have to be super spiritual or anything, you know, just for us, all of us on this call, you know, it's like a realistic, attainable possibility, you know. And if it was, if we did kind of have a vision of a more modest awakening, what do we think that would be? You know, would that be the same as what we've just talked about, or would that be, yeah, what could that be? What could a modest awakening be? So what I'd like us to do is now is Padmatara is going to, well, maybe I'll just see if there's any questions, and then Padmatara is going to put us into little breakout groups, and we can just, well, we can have a break actually in the breakout group. So I thought we could combine it. So just take 5 minutes to have a little break if you want to grab a cup of tea or whatever. And then let's see what time it is now. Should we have 25 minutes altogether? So we have a 5-minute break and then 20 minutes just to talk in the little groups about, you know, what would a modest awakening be? That's the question.